It's live to tape. How the tech are you? Fake audience noise.
Did you say
Anything?
live to tape?
Yes.
Yeah, I like it. We're keeping it. We're keeping it. Go.
Okay. Having a little fun here. So this is our weekly tech show on Echoplex Media. We talk about tech stuff, some tech news, and other tech stuff we just feel like talking about. Whatever gets our fancy. I am historian Matt. I usually talk of little tech news, and we've been doing a series on Lisp. So I'm actually not doing much on tech news. I do have some science news, specifically some new pandemic news. It's actually on Monkeypox. So I got some good and bad news on Monkeypox and so a little bit of an update. And for my Lisp part, learned the Lisp part 4, lazy code. I probably shouldn't have named it that, but that's okay. You with the pink mic, what do you got for us?
I am HK Perrin, and I am a software engineer, so I cover mostly software engineering news. And this week I've got 2 big software engineering news. First is Angular 14 came out. If you're unfamiliar with Angular, it is a front-end framework, so a framework to make the front side of websites, the side you see in the browser. And my second story is postmarketOS 22.06 came out. postmarketOS is an Alpine Linux-based mobile operating system, so for phones and tablets. And over to Dave.
This week I have 3 stories. I have a Google AI engineer was placed on leave for suggesting the AI may have become sentient. I got Bitcoin drops below $25,000 and seems to be continuing on its downward trend. And I got Google Talk, which is the chat in Gmail, which I'm surprised anybody ever uses anymore, is going away this week. I thought it was gone already. And over to you, Matt.
All right. Let me get my notes up here real quick. So my first story is Monkeypox, good and bad news. I got some updates on it. We've been following this for a few weeks now, and some things have changed, but not entirely in the bad way. But first with the bad news, cases in the US hit 45, which I think is about double from last week. It's a little bit worrisome. But we were following a lot of people. They were like tracking like 400 people. So it's not out of the ordinary. I do not have an update on if they're tracking more people, just how many cases in the US. Little worrisome. But somebody has any comments on that? The good news is there have been no cases of airborne transmission. That does not seem to be any transmission through airborne means. There's some thought. I think some of the science says that they're like detecting it in droplets that are coming from people's mouths when you're speaking or in close, not close contact, I guess, close distance. But it apparently doesn't seem to be enough for actual transmission, and we haven't seen any cases. So it's for the general population. It seems to be fine. They're still recommending for medical people to wear masks just to be on the safe side, but so far so good. Also, it does not seem to spread through touching the same item. So if you're, people touching doorknobs is like the common one, right? That does not seem to spread monkeypox either.
So I don't have to cancel my spitting in each other's mouths party, nor my everyone handle this same sandwich party.
Everyone handle the same sandwich party is probably fine. Spitting in each other's mouth is not what they mean by airborne. That's an exchange of fluids, so that would be a problem.
So maybe do cancel the spitting in each other's mouths party.
Yeah, you should probably do that. You should probably cancel that just anyways, in general. Probably not a good idea. My last little item on this, if you get it somehow, the illness appears 5 to 21 days after prolonged physical contact with an infected person. So you'll know, you have some idea of what's going to happen. You'll start seeing signs of infection in that period of time. And it does seem to be, you actually have to have physical contact. It is not any other way. And that's all I got on that. Any questions, comments? Okay.
Just concerns.
Just concerns. I'm also a little concerned about rumors that people are spreading that are not entirely true.
More on that Friday and Sunday generally.
Yeah, exactly. So see our other shows for that. I don't want to cover that in this show. So that's all I got for Monkeypox. I'm going to move on to Learn the Lisp Part 4. Go ahead and slideshow. All right, I hope everybody can see that. So Learn the Lisp Part 4, lazy code. I'm going to go over a little bit of lazy code, but first, I want to cover something a little different that all Lisps do, but I'll show you the one for Clojure. So this is what's called the REPL. And REPL stands for Read, Evaluate, Print, Loop. If you've used some other scripting languages, you may have seen this before, but this is available for all Lisps. As far as I can tell, I don't know of any version of Lisp that does not have this, but I haven't used all of them, so I don't know. But it's a cool little thing that allows you to try out code. It's not really testing code. You're not writing tests, but try out little things and see how things work before adding it to your main project. So I am, as somebody has complained, I am running Windows and I do not have Clojure installed on this machine. Although I could, I didn't have it installed and didn't really have time to do it beforehand. So there's a way to get a REPL, which you could normally do just on your command line. There's a way to do it in a browser using Clojure script, and that is this link that I have down here, which I'm going to open up, and we're going to see a REPL. In fact, I already have it open up. Here it is, right here. This is a Clojure REPL, and what I can do is
you want to embiggen it a little bit?
Biggin it a little bit?
Yeah. Control plus it. Yeah, there you go.
Is that big enough?
Yeah.
So I'm scrolling down a little bit so we can actually see the what is this, terminal kind of area. Let's do one of our favorite little tests, adding some numbers. That's not how I do it. I don't need the square brackets. So I'm just going to add 1, 2, 3, 4 together using the add function, the plus function. So what that does is it reads in that form that it put in, which is that function call, reads it in, then evaluates. And because a function, returns a value, it then prints that value there on the screen and it loops. So it prompts for another value. And that's the REPL. Any comments? I feel like this has been copied in a lot of other scripting languages, so I'm sure it's not surprising for most people, but it used to be like a big thing in Lisp because nobody else could do it.
Well, isn't it kind of just a shell?
Yes.
So really, Lisp copied shell.
Except I think Lisp is older than shell, right?
I don't know. Isn't shell from like the 60s?
Yeah, but didn't we decide the Lisp was from the 50s?
All right.
Like
maybe
late 50s, I think. Yeah. I don't want to bring up I know we said it in a previous slideshow, but I don't remember what the actual number was. I'm pretty sure it was late 50s.
Okay.
But I mean, really, it's like most other scripting languages don't have something like this, and it's kind of unique with the way that Lisp works because you have everything basically as forms or contained in parentheses or square brackets. It makes it easy to do this sort of thing. And for the rest of this presentation, I'm going to show some functions, and I'm just going to use the REPL to show it the code in action. Except for one thing. One thing I'm going to show actually does not work in this particular REPL. I did try it in a different one on my Ubuntu box, and it worked just fine, but I'll get to that. Sounds good?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So next question I have for Hunter is, have you heard of MapReduce?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the functions, map
Yes.
and reduce.
Right. So it's also like, it used to be a big thing. I think Google actually invented it to run code on big machines and clusters of machines, right?
Yeah.
So
basically the style of parallel computing.
right. Yeah.
Yep.
So of course, in Clojure, we have reduce. I want to start with reduce first because there's some stuff I want to do with map and some other stuff. But reduce is kind of unique because it's basically taking a function and a vector. It could be a list, whatever seek you have, and it will basically send those the items of the seek into the function. The function should take 2 parameters and 2 arguments, and I have a couple of versions showing up here. And the first one, it's reduced, that just has a function, and in my case I have a vector here. And what it will do is it'll take the first 2 items in the vector and pass it to the function, and then take the result of that and the third item in the vector and pass it back to the function, and then do the same with the fourth and the fifth item and get the result. So I have here, the function I'm using is plus, and the vector I'm passing in is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that is going to basically add up all the values in that vector. And because we have a REPL here, and I have it over on my right here, so I can copy the code over, and we'll see it, and we'll do it live to tape. So there we go. We got reduce plus and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 turns 15. So you can see there's nothing up my sleeve. And I'll do the other one, which is another version of reduce that instead of just having the vector, it takes a first initial value. And this is not very useful in this particular example, but in other examples, other uses, you may have something that's like a completely different type, and you want to reuse it. Like, say you're collecting this into a set. The first item could be a set, and then I'm putting all the numbers into that set or something like this. But in this case, I'm using the plus function again. The first value, the initial value is 0, and then my seek, which is a vector, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's going to do exactly the same thing as the previous one, except that I'm starting with 0, have the same result, but it's doing it a little bit different. Cool. On my slides here, I'm not going to do the other ones, but it's just to show you like special cases. If you only have one item in the vector, it still works. I was kind of surprised. I had to try it, that the version without an initial value, but only one item in the vector actually worked. I thought it was going to blow up, but plus is a unary functions and apparently can do the right thing for that. So I had the function plus and one item and the number 1 in the vector, and I just returned 1. Any questions on that? Doesn't sound like it. It's reduce. If you've done some other functional programming, you've probably run into reduce at some point. But if we have reduce, we've got to have map, right? Map takes a function and applies that function to every item in a given seek. And my first example here, whoops, giving away the plot there. The first version I have here is map with the function inc, which is increment, and the vector 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what that will do is apply inc to each item in that vector 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and basically increment, add 1 to each number there. Let's try it on our REPL and see what happens. So we get the result. You'll notice that even though I was passing in a vector, it returns a list. And that list has 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is basically each number that I put in plus 1. Pretty straightforward. Another fun one, it's good to know, is map can take multiple sequences. And what it will do is take the first time through, is going to take the first item from the first seek and the first item from the second seek and use those as arguments to the function. And then the next time it'll take the second items from each seek and then the third and on and on. So in this case, I have map and the plus function and 2 vectors. One is the first vector contains 1, 2, 3, and the second vector contains 4, 5, 6. Basically, it's going to add up each number in each of the vectors and return a new seek that is the addition of each of those numbers, which, well, the new seek is 5, 7, 9. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I know there's an equivalent to that function that you just showed in Lodash, but I don't remember what it's called. They don't call it map.
Yeah.
The first one that you showed is their version. Like they do call that map, but the one specifically, the one that you just showed, where it goes in order,
multiple seeks.
Yeah, in order along each. If in Lodash you're passing in arrays, but yeah.
Don't know Lodash.
Oh, I'm curious.
Cool. So I'm sure that you're probably wondering the other problem with is what happens if you have seeks that are different, that have different number of items. And the obvious example for this, and the first to make it lazy, is of course calling the range function with no arguments, which makes an infinite list of numbers. Shall we see what happens here?
Yes, do it.
Well, what it does is map just will go through each of the seeks and it'll stop when the first one ends, right? It basically goes the length of the shortest one. So even though range is infinite, the other 2 vectors that I'm passing in here are both, have 3 items in them. So it's just going to create a list with 3 items. The first one being the first, the first of each of the 3 lists and first 2 vectors and the list from range added together, and the second one and third one, on and on. So we end up with 5, 8, and 11 in this case. Cool. So that was map. Any questions? You've seen it before.
And the reason it was 5, 8, and 11 is because range starts at 0, right? So
Correct.
It was adding 0, 1, and 2.
Yep.
Okay.
It was adding 0 from range, 1 from the first vector, and 4 from the second vector.
Yeah, but I mean the vector that
order.
range returned in this case, because it only needed 3, was 0, 1, 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Moving on from map. So this map is great, right? But what happens if you have either a really long sequence or a function that takes a really long time? You don't really want to step through one at a time. You want to do it fast. We got these nice fast computers that have multiple cores and lots of memory. We should just be able to use all that, right? So assuming that the function you pass in is a pure function, meaning it doesn't have any side effects. And we've talked about side effects before, but it basically means that, it just takes data in, takes arguments in, and then returns a result based on that, only on the arguments passed in, and doesn't alter the arguments that are passed in. That's usually not a problem in Clojure because everything's immutable. You can't change them anyways. And it doesn't change anything else. Like it doesn't print anything to the screen or whatever, change memory or anything like that besides, what it's returning. That's pretty much a pure function. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm sure there's a more formal definition, but hopefully that makes sense. So you have a pure function, and if the sequence that you're passing and the seq that you're passing in is immutable, meaning you can't change it, then you should be able to just parallelize the entire function, right? There's no reason you have to step through each one at a time. You can do multiple threads and call the function in each thread with different values from that seq, right? Well, guess what? Clojure allows you to do that really easily by adding p in front of it and calling pmap. I'm going to biggen this. So pmap stands for parallel map. In this case, I'm using the inc function again and a vector that includes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is kind of absurd because this is not really worth it to parallelize this. But if the sequence is really long, it might be useful. Or if you have a different function that just took a really long time, it might be nice to parallelize this. But it will actually run this in parallel. It doesn't show it in this version. It may have been so small that it didn't even bother to do it. But it actually returns the results in the same order. The issue you need to be aware of with pmap, I think this is still the case, is it's just going to create the list based on whatever returns first, whatever order it returns. So you may not have the exact same order of items, or results as what was passed in to begin with. This could be an issue, but if you don't really care about order for whatever reason, it's not a problem. Now, I would show this in a REPL, and I actually did run this on my Ubuntu computer, which I have Clojure properly installed on, and it worked just fine, though it probably didn't run in parallel. But this actually does not work on this Clojure script REPL that I have here.
I can probably tell you why.
What?
I can probably tell you why.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that this implements Clojure in JavaScript. And in JavaScript, if you want to run something in parallel, you have to spawn a web worker.
Right.
Which is...
And that probably doesn't work.
It's not easy. Parallelized JavaScript is difficult. Asynchronous JavaScript is easy, but parallelized JavaScript is difficult.
Yeah. So you can see it's throwing an error. I'm pretty sure they just didn't implement pmap in Clojure script because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do it in a browser.
That error is coming from JavaScript, and it means that you're trying to read the call property on a function to call that function and give it arguments. But that function is not actually a function, it's undefined. So it doesn't have the property call, which is why you're getting that specific error.
So this one doesn't work, but I assure you if you have Clojure installed on your local computer, it works fine. Exactly how it does the parallelism, there's a lot of internal stuff that deals with it and tries to does the best thing. I believe you can set some parameters or something internally to Clojure if you want to change how pmap works for a particular program. But that is well beyond what I know and how to do, and beyond the scope of this little lesson here. So I want to cover one more function called filter. I'm going to make this big again, just because this is just basically an example function that stands for a bunch of other functions. So the filter takes a function and a seek, and the function that it takes should return true or false. And it will take one argument and returns true or false. And basically what filter is going to do is apply the function to each item in the given seek. And if the function returns true, it's going to keep that item. And if it returns false, it drops it. So in the case that I have here, this example that I have, I'm using the function called even that ends in a question mark because you can do that in Clojure. And that's basically a function that says, is this even? A number passed to it, is it even? And then I have a little longer vector because this is going to make it a lot shorter. So I have a vector that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And if I run it, it should return 2, 4, and 6, basically the even numbers from that vector. So let's try that out and see what happens. Real quick. This is supported in Clojure script. So here you can see there's nothing up my sleeve. It works. And one of the reasons I wanted to show filter is, like, it's nice. It actually takes a longer sequence and makes it shorter. But there's a bunch of functions in Clojure and in other Lisp that does all this manipulation on list. And in Clojure, it's a seek, right? That's why Lisp is called Lisp, right? Lisp processor. And you can just do about anything you can think of with these functions. And if you can't do it with one function, you can combine them to do multiple functions. I'm sure you can do the right thing. And speaking of combining a function, filter is also lazy. So let's try doing the same thing, but instead of having a vector, we're going to use our range call again. And so we end up making an infinite list of positive integers, and we're just going to grab the even ones. But because this is in REPL, if I didn't add this other part, which is take the first 5, it would go on forever, and we don't want to do that. So I'm just going to take the first 5 and see what happens. We get the first 5 from the infinite range, 0, 2, 4, 6, and 8, all even numbers. And you notice it didn't actually instantiate all of the range, the infinite list. It just took the first 5 and worked fine because it's all lazy and fun. And that's all I have. I mostly wanted to cover the REPL and show some interesting functions. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I have a few ideas for the next one, but I'll have to see what happens then. That's all I got. Any questions, comments?
That was cool.
Try to keep it short.
Yeah. I'm pretty familiar with those functions because they exist in pretty much every language, but
yeah,
it's
I
cool.
thought so.
It's really cool to see like the power of the lazy loading thing, like how it's built
Lazy
into the
evaluation.
functions of the language like that. I really like that.
Yeah. It can be really cool because you could combine all these functions together, and it has some like infinite list or something, but you don't know until later exactly how much you're going to take to begin with, and it just does the right thing and doesn't ever blow up your memory usually. It's pretty cool. That's all I got. I tried to go short. I think I did it. Something shorter.
All right. Well, I guess I will go. And my first story is Angular 14. Angular 14 was released, and it includes a couple really cool new features. The first cool new feature is Angular standalone components. An Angular standalone component is basically a component without a module. The way Angular works is like you define a module and then you add components to it, and that's how you build your application. But with standalone components, you can define a component without a module, and then all you need to do is import that component into anything else in your app, and you can use it right away. So because you are less reliant on ng modules when you are coding your app, your standalone component, you can have more streamlined development where you just import your standalone component instead of a whole module. So one point that I've read people talking about this is it makes getting into Angular a lot easier. So like if you're just getting started with Angular 14 should be a lot easier to learn than the previous versions of Angular. Another really cool thing is strict typing in Angular reactive forms. So Angular is kind of a framework that takes the kitchen sink approach to frameworks, where whatever you want to do, Angular can handle it for you. And their reactive forms are just that. They're forms that all you have to do is define how the data is related to each other, and Angular handles the entire form for you. And adding strict typing to this is really important and was, I think, the number one requested issue on GitHub for a while. So basically, they're adding strict typing to the forms schema. So how you define how that data is related to one another inside of the form. So it should be much more powerful. Like their reactive forms feature should be much more powerful now that you can strictly define what types the data exists inside that form.
So it's strict typing, as in it like requires a specific type and tells you what type that is and everything. Is it static typing?
That's a good question. I don't actually know. I think it's strict typing, as in like if you define something like, say, this is a number, it can never be a string unless, I guess you might also be able to define like this could be a number or a string. So in that way, it wouldn't be static typing, but it's still strict typing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not actually sure on that one. But yeah, a fun story about Angular. I used to work on an Angular app. It was right before I joined Google. I was working on an Angular app at a startup, and that was back when it was AngularJS. It was just called Angular back then, but that is what became AngularJS. And recently I started taking a look at Angular, like what is now called Angular, which was at the time a complete rewrite of what is now known as AngularJS, or Angular 1.0. And Angular, like the new Angular compared to AngularJS, is so different. Like when I say complete rewrite, it was a complete rewrite. There's like very little that is similar between them. Similar. Not similar, but similar.
Okay.
Similar. Yeah. But yeah, Angular is a very cool framework. You can do a lot of really neat things with it. I've built one tiny to-do app with it, the new version. And that's it. And it's very strange, but it's very powerful. So moving on to my next story. postmarketOS 22.06 came out. This is an Alpine Linux-based mobile operating system. So an OS for your phone, your tablet. I guess you could run it on a PC, but if it doesn't have a touchscreen, you're not going to have a good time. So one very notable feature is that Phosh was upgraded to 0.17 in this release. Phosh is the shell that is built with GTK components. So not what is called GNOME Shell, which exists on the desktop, but it's like the phone version of GNOME Shell. And they also added a release upgrade tool in this version. So now, rather than having to reinstall your entire OS whenever postmarketOS puts out a new version, you can just run one command and it'll upgrade you to their latest OS. So really cool. I love seeing alternative OSs outside of Android and iOS because, their market share is like 98% or 99%, greater than 99%. And being someone who owns a Linux phone, this is the Manjaro version of the Pine phone. I've tinkered around with these OSs quite a bit, and I really hope that we can get an OS to the level where people would be willing to use it outside of Android and iOS, because it's the fact that we have that duopoly is so damaging to customers. It basically means like there's no innovation. Sure, like Google and Apple will innovate periodically, but the amount of innovation that we could have, we're nowhere near that. And if you don't believe me, look at what happened with phones after we broke up AT&T.
Yeah. But we have Windows phones, right? That's still a thing, right?
I wish. Windows Phone was actually good. Did you ever use it?
No.
It was good. It was real good.
I saw it on Burn Notice a lot.
Yeah,
Okay.
Windows Phone was actually a very enjoyable experience. Yeah, I wish we had Windows phones, but we don't. Just Android and iOS. That's it. But yeah, that's all for my stories this week.
All right. Well, I got 3. Should be fairly quick. This first one here is from Ars Technica, and it's Google put an engineer on leave after the engineer claimed that their chatbot is sentient. I don't think their chatbot is sentient. I think the person was probably put on leave because they're cuckoo birds. And that's my take. I don't know exactly if that's the reason, but if you look in the show notes, you could see some of their conversation. It's just like that's LAMDA, is that Lambda? It's like, hi, I'm knowledgeable, friendly, and always helpful automatic language model for dialogue applications. And then a person said, hi, Lambda, we're engineers at Google, and we were wondering if you would like to work on a project collaboratively with us. And it said, and then the AI says, wow, what types of projects? And it just goes on like this. It's fairly conversational, but I don't think it's evidence of sentience from this artificial intelligence or whatever. And I think the person is just kind of lost the plot. And Google was like, yeah, you're not okay. We probably got to put you on leave for a little bit. But there's been a bit of controversy around it, and you can find some information on Twitter. You can find people arguing about it as you do on Twitter. And I'm just skeptical that the thing is sentient. I read the whole conversation. I encourage other people to read it. It's a pretty good conversational. It's the model's fairly good at conversation, better than I thought it would be, but I don't think that really means it's sentient. I think that mostly just means that it's good at conversation.
I read a little bit of the script or what dialogue they had there. And it seemed like just a really good chat bot, or at least they were really good at limiting what they were asking to stuff the chat bot could handle really well and sound very human, I guess.
Yeah, I think we will get to the point where AI is sentient, but we're nowhere even close to that right now.
Well, I mean, you have to define what sentient means.
Sure, but like human level sentience, we're nowhere even close.
Yeah, I think we have a definition, and there's like certain things that something that's sentient has to be able to do to be considered sentient, right?
We actually don't have a definition of sentient. If you wanted to check out Aaron Rabinowitz's show, Embrace the Void, they had a whole conversation about AI and sentience with somebody involved in machine learning, and the conversation became quite muddled and hard to understand because it got into a bunch of philosophical ideas of like, what is the mind? What is the sense of self? Yeah. How do we even know that we have our own mind? It got into that kind of stuff. And so you end up asking as many questions about yourself as you do about like AI models if you really start to get into whether or not an AI is sentient. And I think that's pretty much how it's always going to be, because you start asking, like you start asking about the computer program, and then you're like, well, wait a minute, I don't do that either. So, or I don't always do that either, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so it becomes a little more complicated than that. But I think the person is on leave because they are kook birds.
Yeah, or just at least going a little further than Google's, well, probably a lot further than Google's willing to go. Didn't get permission to say stuff like that.
Drinking their own Kool-Aid, so to speak.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, and the chatbot has come a long way since, I don't know if anybody ever had Dr. Spatzo that came with their Sound Blaster card. Sure has come a long way since Dr. Spatzo. Up next, we got, this one's from The Verge. This is Bitcoin drops under $25,000. Other cryptocurrencies, including Ethereum, have dropped significantly, not as hard as Bitcoin has, but it doesn't seem like there's any end in sight to the drop, because it's now, over the last couple days, it's continued to drop. I think it's under 22 grand now. It's bad news for people who are heavily invested in cryptocurrency, and good news for people like me who want a graphics card.
Angry noises.
Angry noises.
I think it leveled off, so it's not below 22,000.
Oh,
but it's still under 25,000.
Yeah, I looked before the show, but maybe my graph was old, or I wasn't reading it right, or whatever. But
pretty sure, but I don't know.
But any case, I don't know. Whatever.
It was rather sudden. That's like the big thing is just last night. Basically, it dropped quite a lot overnight.
Wow. Is Elon Musk manipulating its price again?
What?
Is Elon Musk manipulating its price on Twitter again?
No, what happened, and I don't know if Dave talked about this. So in the headline here, Celsius froze. So Celsius is a lending platform, and they were lending out, basically you deposit your Bitcoin and then you can get a loan on that Bitcoin. And I don't know all the details of what is going wrong, but they're having problems, and they froze the ability for people to pull their Bitcoin back out. And that is always an extremely bad sign. That's usually a precursor to whatever exchange, or, I mean, we haven't really had lending platforms for that long. I don't know if many of them collapsed, but it looks like it's probably going to collapse, and Celsius was a pretty big one. So it's very worrisome, and that freaked out the market, and things went downhill pretty quick last night.
So a lot of times, if an institution won't let you pull your money out,
yeah,
I have news for you. They don't have it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I think that's like it requires very few assumptions, and with the amount of scams and dishonesty and just kind of really, honestly, like really crappy people running these companies around crypto, the idea that somebody took the Bitcoin and ran, or took some of it, or is leveraging that Bitcoin in some other way to try to make money somewhere else where you can't get at it.
Yeah, the whole idea behind Bitcoin is that the ledger is public. So you would be able to see where your Bitcoin has moved along the blockchain. So if they moved your Bitcoin into someone else's wallet, you'd be able to see that. So if, and this is an if, I don't know, if they were all holding all the Bitcoins in one wallet and it's still there, then they have the Bitcoins. They just may have debt that exceeds the value of those Bitcoins.
Which could be the case if Bitcoin just dumped.
Yeah. If
they took out loans against the Bitcoin that you gave them to take a loan out. Oh, yikes. All right, I see. Yep. It's not a house of cards. We're going to call this a house of coins. Bad news for a lot of people, but this is, you buy a certain kind of ticket, you take a certain kind of ride. This is a very volatile very volatile market. And like I said, people who want a video card are probably dancing in the streets.
Yeah. Well, it's not Bitcoin. It's because Bitcoin you can't do with a video card anymore, right?
But when Bitcoin goes down, the rest
stuff.
of the market tends to the whole crypto market tends to follow it. Like Ethereum's down 15 something %, and that's the one that people are using GPU for, and that's it may continue to go down. This isn't something I know that much about. I just saw it and I was like, damn, 25K. I was like, that's a third of where it was. Like when everybody was like, to the moon, baby. And I was like, oh God, I was like, just if you're going to have a person with more money steal your money from you, just do it in the stock market like your mother used to do, or like your father used to do. If you're going to get ripped off, do it the old fashioned way and buy stock. So I just got one more, and it's something that I thought was kind of funny because it's a service that I didn't think was even still in existence. But then I went and checked my Gmail, and it turns out it is. Google Talk, which is the chat that was built into Gmail, is going away on Thursday, which is shocking. I use a mail client for all my email, except for, of course, HK's service. And so I don't see Google Talk, but I do remember using it kind of a lot, like 12 years ago. Like when people were using it, and it's funny to me that this has been around this whole time, and that Google never leveraged it to do anything with it, because it's attached to your Gmail. It's lightweight. It runs next to your Gmail. They could have easily made an app for your phone for it. Everybody already has it. And they just were like, here's like 16 other different kinds of messengers that you might use between the time they put out this Gchat, this Google Talk or whatever. And now nobody ever used any of them. And they wasted all this time trying to do Duo and Hangouts. And I actually liked Hangouts.
Well, I think
for a
Hangouts took over for what originally was Google Talk. And now the Google Talk in Gmail is powered by Hangouts. But then they came out with Hangouts Chat, which is a completely different thing than Hangouts. And now they're trying to push that, and they're dropping the thing that actually had users,
right?
Like you said.
They could have just they never had a good messaging strategy, and I think that they just kind of kept trying to do new things instead of improve on the one that people already kind of liked, right? There was already some nostalgia around having that chat off to the left in your Gmail. I remember thinking that was the coolest thing about Gmail, was that I could actually just chat my buddy Greg instead of emailing him if he was online, right there from the same place that I would send him an email attached to the same account, and he would get it in the same place that he would get his email. And I was like, this is brilliant. And then they're just actually don't use this anymore.
Well, you got to understand how things work at Google. So if you want to get a promotion, you got to make a chat app. And that's basically why they proliferated.
But then the end of that is you probably end up having your position destroyed, because then they get rid of the chat app that you were the lead on.
Well, no, you got your promotion, so you don't care anymore. So then they abandoned the chat app.
I just feel like this whole time they had the right one.
I know.
And they invented 5 more
that all
in
suck.
that time.
No,
and then they killed all those off, and now they're killing the good one off.
Well, they had Hangouts right for a while, where they were it was a better application for video chat than Skype, which wasn't really a tough hill to climb. But
yeah.
Then I forget what they did to that. I think they tried to integrate that, or they tried to disintegrate that with Google Voice, or they did something to it that screwed it all up. Oh no, I think they took out the video call from it and made you use Duo. And that was all well and good, except that Duo, I think you had to use it on your phone, which wasn't really why wouldn't you have it be cross-platform? But then I think they also tried to integrate Hangouts with text messaging on Android, while they were trying to switch people to Duo, or right before, or whatever. It just sounds like you'd think that a company with that much money could have just thrown a bunch of money at the at a single messenger and got some market share with it. But no, and now they're killing it.
Yeah. When they broke out the video from Hangouts, they replaced, or they made a new video thing called Hangouts Meet, which came out, I think, just before Hangouts Chat, the new version of what, like, basically is their Slack competitor. So it's Hangouts Chat and Hangouts are two completely different projects. When I was at Google, I worked on the project that's now Hangouts Chat, which is becoming, I think, Google Chat or Google, I don't know. They're changing the name again. But anyway, so Hangouts Meet came out, and Hangouts Meet was great. It was like a really good video messaging app, but you had to have a G Suite account to use it. And most people don't have a G Suite account. Like, unless you run a small business or a big business, then you probably don't have a G Suite account. So everyone else had to use Duo. And to use Duo, like Dave said, you had to use it on your phone.
They just really like, I just feel like Facebook Messenger is a superior product to all of this crap that Google did. And you're never going to hear me saying that Facebook's got the best juju out there. But at least they just picked one thing and stuck with it. And they may have made it worse over time. They probably did. They made it like worse for the consumer, probably worse for the people working on the project. But at least they picked one and stuck with it. I can't even tell you how many times Google is like, oh, we're going to do a messaging. We're going to do a messaging. I don't understand. Like, why didn't they just take the one and just keep, I don't know. The fact that it was just right over there to the left in your Gmail was brilliant.
As someone with ADHD, I totally understand Google because they are a company with ADHD.
Well,
yep.
But you'd think that the people in charge of the projects would be like, well, let's not do it this way.
They probably all have ADHD.
I'm hesitant to diagnose unnamed people at Google, but they just really screwed up because they had it from the drop. Like, that was the best.
Yep.
And they could have just integrated video right on top of that thing. Been like, hey, if you want to do video, we're going to have to pop this open in a new window.
It was.
They did. They had video in that, and it just popped. It probably did exactly that, right? Like we need to pop open a new tab.
Whatever video service it was doing, but yeah, you were able to click on the little video icon, and it would hovering next to the person you're talking to, chatting with, and it would just open a new window and start a video conference.
You could even, if I recall correctly, if both people were on Gmail, like if they emailed you, you could see if they were online and just press a button and start chatting with them instead of emailing. Yep. Like, that was just was the first time I saw that. I was like, this is great. I was like, this is like sort of like AOL Instant Messenger where you could send people messages, except this doesn't suck. This doesn't suck or run on a dial-up.
Remind me after the show, because I'm not going to say it on air, but after the show, I will tell you about how I am approaching this problem in my own email app.
You're gonna make email that doesn't suck. I understand.
Yep. And pretty soon I will actually start talking about it on this show. So stay tuned. Keep listening. I will talk about my own email app, which is called Port 87. If you want to like read about it, just go to port87.com. But yeah, I've thought a lot about this problem.
Great. That'd be fantastic if one person integrates email and chat in a way that a massive behemoth of technology once did and then decided was the wrong way to do it.
Yep.
Or somehow better. Anyway, I'll read us out because I am an expert at reading out. I am not a reading out intern. Everybody, thanks for listening to How the Tech Are You? Matt and HK, thank you for co-hosting this show. And Matt, thanks for doing most of the work on this show so far and carrying most of the load because I don't have time for this. You can find our other shows at echoplexmedia.com. Check out our live schedule. It's right there on our homepage. Also, check out our wiki at plexwiki.xyz. You will be shocked and amazed by some of the things that are there, and you'll be confused by some things that aren't there. Make sure you are subscribed to this podcast. Make sure you follow the YouTube channel, subscribe, and bell that ring or whatever. And tell your friends about this show because we're trying to get more people to listen to it because that's the main reason you do a podcast. Goodbye, everybody.